The sound of metal grinding against concrete jolted me out of my chair. I ran outside, heart pounding, and froze. Karen stood at the end of my driveway, arms crossed like she owned the world, barking orders at two construction workers who were tearing apart the wheelchair path I had built for my daughter. Dust filled the air, and through it all, I could see my little girl, clutching her pink wheelchair handles, tears streaking down her cheeks as her only path to freedom was being destroyed piece by piece. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice breaking. The workers hesitated, glancing between me and Karen. But she just smirked. "You were warned," she snapped. "This ramp violates HOA standards." I couldn't breathe. That ramp wasn't just concrete. It was months of saving, nights of planning, and a lifeline for my disabled daughter. My neighbors began stepping out of their houses, one by one, watching the chaos unfold. Some whispered. Some recorded. No one spoke up. That was the moment everything changed, not just for me, but for this entire neighborhood. Because when you threaten a child's right to live freely, you awaken something powerful. If someone tried to destroy your disabled child's only way to move, what would you do? Comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this moment already hit your heart, don't scroll past, hit that subscribe button and stand with us. Because this story, this war with HOA, Karen, it's only getting started. Before all this madness, our street was the kind of place you'd dream of raising a family in. Quiet mornings, kids riding their bikes, dogs barking, and the sweet smell of freshly cut grass floating through the air. We moved here hoping for peace, for a new start after the accident that changed everything. My daughter, Sada, was only 10 when a drunk driver ran a stop sign and shattered her spine. The doctors said she'd never walk again, but they didn't know her spirit. For months, I watched her fight, learning how to wheel herself forward one painful push at a time. Every inch was a victory. And when I finally finished building her wheelchair ramp, she cried tears of joy. That small slope of concrete became her bridge to freedom. It let her feel like a kid again, rolling out to the yard, feeding her puppy, waving at our neighbors as the sun dipped behind the trees. Most of the neighbors were kind. They smiled. They asked about Siva. They even brought cookies after therapy sessions. But there was one person who never smiled, Karen. She lived 2 houses down, always in perfect clothes, always watching from her window. I'd catch her frowning every time my daughter rolled outside, as if happiness itself violated some unspoken rule. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself not to judge, not to assume the worst. Maybe she was just lonely. Maybe she didn't understand what we'd been through. But deep down, I could feel it. A storm was brewing, and if I had known how far Karen would go, I would have started documenting everything from that very first glare. Because what began as a peaceful neighborhood was about to turn into a battlefield. Would you have seen the warning signs? Comment below. What would you have done if you were me? It started with a letter taped to my front door. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and stamped with that golden HOA emblem that made my stomach twist. Inside, a typed notice. Unauthorized modification to exterior property. Wheelchair ramp must be removed within 14 days. No signature, just a neat, cold line that said, per HOA regulations. I remember standing there on my porch, staring at the paper, my hands shaking. The ramp wasn't a modification. It was a necessity, my daughter's only safe path in and out of the house. I marched straight to Karen's place. She was pruning her roses, humming like she didn't have a care in the world. "Karen," I said, holding the letter up, "did this come from you?" She looked up, gave me that fake, tight smile. "Oh, so you got it." "Yes, I filed the complaint. The ramp doesn't match the neighborhood's aesthetic. It lowers property value." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's my daughter's medical ramp." I said, my voice cracking. "She's disabled." "You can't," Karen interrupted. "We all have to follow the same rules. Sympathy doesn't make you special." I felt the blood rush to my face. The neighbors nearby looked away, pretending not to hear. I wanted to scream, to tear that smug look off her face. But I didn't. I just said, "You will regret this, Karen. You will." That night, I called the HOA office myself, hoping to find some sanity. But the woman on the phone sounded distant, nervous. "I'm sorry, sir, but if a board member files a violation, we have to review it." And that's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just another neighbor. She was the vice president of the HOA. From that moment, everything changed. Every email I sent, every conversation, every step I took, she watched, like a hawk waiting to pounce. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you fight the HOA head on or stay quiet to protect your peace? Tell me in the comments. I want to know how you'd handle a neighbor like Karen. Because trust me, that letter was just the beginning. After that letter, things started to shift in ways only someone who's been targeted would understand. At first, it was subtle, the kind of quiet harassment that makes you question your own sanity. Every morning, I'd find fresh photos tucked under my doormat, close-ups of the ramp, of my porch, even of my daughter's wheelchair parked beside the front steps. No note, no explanation. Just silence and snapshots. Then came the friendly reminders. Karen would drop by, clipboard in hand, pretending to be helpful. "Just letting you know," she'd say sweetly, "that the HOA will start issuing fines if this ramp isn't removed soon. I'd hate for that to happen to you." Her tone was drenched in fake kindness, like a wolf wearing perfume. My daughter started to notice too. She'd will to the window and whisper, "Dad, she's taking pictures again." I'd try to distract her with stories, with laughter, with anything that could keep her from seeing the ugliness outside. But how do you protect a child from something you can't physically stop? Weeks went by, and suddenly we started getting mail that wasn't ours, HOA forms, newsletters, sometimes even other people's fines. I later realized Karen had switched our mailbox labels by accident. Then one night, a garbage notice appeared on our lawn, accusing us of unsanitary disposal because our trash bins were half an inch out of line. I reported it all, the photos, the letters, the garbage, but no one wanted to get involved. "She's on the board," one neighbor whispered. "Just play along." But I couldn't. I built that ramp with my own hands, with every ounce of hope left in me. Watching her try to take it away felt like she was dismantling my daughter's dignity brick by brick. Still, I stayed calm. I told myself I'd fight the right way, with proof, not anger. But inside, the frustration burned. Every petty act felt personal. Every smirk from her window felt like a victory she'd stolen. Then came the day she crossed the line. I walked out to find a bright orange tag nailed to the ramp, pending demolition order. My daughter saw it before I did. She started crying, gripping my arm, whispering, "Dad, they can't take it away, right?" I knelt beside her, holding her close. "They won't, sweetheart," I said, even though I wasn't sure. Because how do you explain to a child that grown adults can be this cruel? That night, as I tucked her into bed, I made a promise, not just to her, but to myself. I'd fight back. I didn't care who Karen thought she was. I'd go to the city, the media, even the courthouse if I had to. If you've ever had someone bully you just because they could, hit that like button right now. Because what Karen didn't know was, every act of cruelty she threw at us was being quietly recorded. And the day she tried to destroy what we built, the whole neighborhood would see who she truly was. Tell me something. Have you ever faced a neighbor who went too far? Drop it in the comments. Because you and I were not that different. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that starts off peaceful enough to make you forget trouble even exists. The sun was warm, birds were singing, and for once, my daughter was smiling as she rolled down her ramp to feed her puppy. I was sipping coffee when I heard it, the deep rumble of heavy machinery. At first, I thought it was road work, but then came the unmistakable sound of a jackhammer on my property. My mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the porch. I ran outside barefoot, my heart racing, and what I saw nearly dropped me to my knees. Karen was there, standing tall, wearing sunglasses and clutching a clipboard, while two men in orange vests tore into the ramp I'd built. Concrete flying, dust everywhere. My daughter sat at the base of the driveway, frozen in her wheelchair, her face pale. "Stop!" I shouted, running toward them. "What are you doing?" One of the workers looked at me nervously. Ma'am from HOA said this ramp wasn't authorized, he stammered. Karen smirked. Just cleaning up the neighborhood. She said, loud enough for everyone to hear. We can't let one family break the rules. Next thing you know, everyone will start building things wherever they want. I couldn't even find words. My hands were shaking. You're destroying a medical ramp. You don't have that right. But Karen just crossed her arms. If you had followed the process like everyone else, this wouldn't be happening. By then, half the street had gathered. Phones out, whispers spreading. My daughter was crying, begging them to stop. And still, Karen didn't flinch. Not an ounce of compassion. I grabbed my phone and started filming. Every second of this is being recorded. I warned. You're violating ADA compliance and state disability law. That's when one of the workers froze. Wait, ADA, he whispered to the other. They dropped their tools. Karen barked, keep working, but they refused. One of them said, quietly, Lady, we're not getting sued for this. For the first time, I saw her confidence crack. Her mouth twitched, her hand trembled. You can't prove anything, she muttered. But even she didn't sound sure. I turned to the neighbors. You've all seen how far she's gone. Enough is enough. And that's when something powerful happened. The woman next door, Mrs. Jensen, who'd always stayed silent, stepped forward. She's right, she said. Karen's been harassing them for months. I have it on my security camera. Another neighbor chimed in. I do too. Within minutes, everyone started speaking up, stories, screenshots, messages, all proof of Karen's campaign against us. Karen's face turned pale. She tried to walk away, but not before I said, You wanted the whole neighborhood to see this ramp torn down? Well, now they will. But they'll also see you. That day, the ramp wasn't just broken, the illusion of Karen's power shattered with it. When I tucked my daughter into bed that night, she asked softly, Daddy, why do people hate what helps us? I didn't have an answer. All I could say was, sometimes people destroy what they don't understand, but we'll fix it together. And as I looked out the window at the cracked remains of that ramp, I made a promise. The next time Karen tried to use the system against us, I'd use the law against her. If you were standing in my driveway that day, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments, because this is the part of the story where I stopped being afraid. What Karen didn't know was that her little act of cruelty was about to backfire in ways she'd never imagined. The war had officially begun. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the broken concrete outside my window, the ramp my daughter had called her Freedom Road. I replayed the chaos over and over in my head. The jackhammer, my daughter's tears, Karen's smug face. But somewhere between exhaustion and rage, something inside me changed. I stopped feeling like a victim. I started thinking like a father on a mission. I opened my laptop and began pulling every single HOA email, letter, and message we'd received. Every fine, every warning. I saved them into a single folder titled Evidence Karen. Then I called the city's accessibility office. I explained everything, the ramp, the harassment, the demolition order. The woman on the phone gasped, Sir, if your daughter is disabled and that ramp was approved by her doctor, the HOA had no authority to remove it. Those words lit a fire in me. By the next morning, I had 3 city inspectors at my property. They documented everything, the broken ramp, the debris, the witnesses. I showed them the video I recorded of Karen giving orders to the workers. Their expressions turned grim. That's criminal damage, one of them said. But I wasn't done. I sent every piece of proof to a local news reporter who covered community disputes. Within 24 hours, she called me back. We want to feature your story. This is an ADA violation and harassment of a disabled minor. People need to see this. And word spread fast. Neighbors who once stayed quiet suddenly started texting me, offering copies of footage, screenshots of Karen's hateful HOA posts, and even recordings of her private complaints at meetings. It was like everyone had been waiting for someone to finally stand up. Meanwhile, Karen's confidence began to crack. She came to my driveway 2 days later, trying to act casual. I think this is getting blown out of proportion, she said. Maybe we can just stop. I cut her off. You had your chance to fix this months ago. Now you'll answer for what you did, not to me, but to the city, the HOA board, and every neighbor you've bullied. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, red-faced, trembling, humiliated. By the end of that week, I received an official letter from the HOA board president. Due to recent findings and community complaints, Vice President Karen Miller has been suspended pending investigation. I read it twice just to make sure it was real. My daughter, sitting beside me, whispered, "Does this mean she can't hurt us anymore?" I smiled and said, "It means she's finally learning what happens when you mess with the wrong family." That evening, something beautiful happened. The same neighbors who once watched in silence showed up at my door, not with complaints, but with tools. They brought cement bags, wooden planks, paint. "We're rebuilding it," one said, "together." For the first time in months, laughter returned to our yard. My daughter giggled as she watched people she barely knew mix cement, plant flowers, and carve a small sign into the fresh concrete, "Community Strong." And as the sun dipped low, I realized something powerful. Karen tried to destroy a path for one child, but she accidentally built a bridge that connected an entire block. If you've ever seen kindness win over cruelty, hit that like button. Tell me below, has your community ever stood up for what's right? Because this story wasn't about a ramp anymore. It was about what happens when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. And as for Karen, well, her reckoning was only just beginning. The HOA had called for an emergency meeting, and this time, I wouldn't be walking in alone. The night before the HOA emergency meeting, I barely slept. I could feel the tension humming in the air, like static before a storm. My daughter was nervous too. She asked me, "Dad, what if they believe her instead of us?" I smiled, trying to sound confident. "Sweetheart, the truth always wins, even if it takes time." But deep down, I wasn't sure. People like Karen usually talk their way out of everything. The next evening, I arrived at the community hall with a folder full of evidence, photos, emails, video clips, and a heart full of quiet fury. The room was packed, every chair taken, every corner filled. Even neighbors I hadn't seen in months were there, whispering. Karen sat at the front table, chin high, pretending to be calm, but her hands were twitching. The HOA board president cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss the complaint filed against Vice President Miller concerning the unauthorized demolition of a private accessibility structure." Karen jumped in before he could finish. That ramp was illegal. It was built without HOA approval. I was protecting our property values. I stood. "Protecting property values?" I said, holding up a photo of my crying daughter as the ramp was destroyed. "This is what you call protection? You humiliated a disabled child to feel powerful." The room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I played the video on the projector, Karen barking orders, workers hammering, my daughter crying. Gasps echoed around the hall. Karen's face turned pale as her own voice filled the room. One of the board members, an older woman who'd always been neutral, spoke up. "Karen, this is cruel. You had no authority. You went too far." But Karen wasn't done. She slammed her hand on the table. "You people don't understand. Rules are rules. If we start bending them for one person, we lose order." That's when Mr. Jensen, my next-door neighbor, stood up from the crowd. "Rules don't mean anything if they destroy compassion," he said. "You talk about order, Karen, but you've turned this neighborhood into a battlefield." Applause broke out, small at first, then louder. Karen's eyes darted around, desperate, like a cornered animal. She tried to regain control. "You're all making a mistake. He's lying." Before she could finish, another neighbor stood up holding a USB drive. "I have footage from my Ring camera," she said. "It shows you giving those workers cash before they tore down the ramp." The president took the drive, plugged it in, and hit play. And there it was, undeniable. Karen handing money to the man, whispering something, glancing around nervously. The board president's face hardened. "Karen Miller," he said slowly, "you are hereby removed from your position and fined for property damage and harassment. This case will also be reported to the city attorney's office." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't do this to me," she shouted. "I am the HOA." "No," I said quietly. "You were." She glared at me, eyes full of hatred, but no words came. Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The silence that followed was heavy, but different this time. It wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. Neighbors began walking up to me, shaking my hand, patting my shoulder, telling me they were sorry for not speaking sooner. Even the board president apologized. When I got home that night, my daughter was waiting by the window. "Did we win?" she asked. I smiled, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "We did, sweetheart, but not because we fought harder, because we stood together." She grinned, her eyes sparkling. "Can we rebuild the ramp tomorrow?" "Tomorrow and better than ever," I said. As I carried her to bed, I looked out at the quiet street, the same one that once watched in silence, now felt alive again, united. "Tell me something," I said softly to the camera later that night. "What would you do if justice was finally on your side?" Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe that truth always finds a way, hit subscribe, because this story isn't just about one Karen. It's about every fight worth taking. But little did I know, the most beautiful part of this story wasn't justice, it was what came after. The next morning, sunlight poured over the driveway, the same driveway that once held tears and broken concrete. But this time, it felt different, hopeful. The sound of laughter replaced the echo of drills and shouting. My neighbors showed up one by one, carrying buckets of cement, lumber, paint, and flowers. Even people I barely knew came over, smiling, ready to help rebuild what Karen had destroyed. My daughter watched from the porch, wrapped in a soft blanket, her eyes wide with wonder. "Dad, they really came," she whispered. "They did," I said, smiling. Because sometimes the worst people bring out the best in everyone else. For the next few hours, our street transformed into something magical. Mr. Jensen mixed the cement. Mrs. Lee painted the railing bright sky blue, my daughter's favorite color. Two teenagers from down the street built flower boxes and filled them with daisies and sunflowers. Even the HOA president, who had been silent for so long, showed up to help smooth the fresh concrete. And when it was finally done, we all stood back and admired it, a new, stronger, more beautiful ramp. My daughter slowly rolled forward, her wheels gliding smoothly down the slope. Everyone clapped. Some people cried. I felt my chest tighten as I watched her throw her arms in the air and laugh for the first time in weeks. Someone had carved 3 small words into the wet cement near the bottom. "We stand together." That simple phrase said everything. It wasn't just about a ramp anymore. It was about a neighborhood that rediscovered its heart. Karen's house sat dark and silent across the street. Her curtains were drawn tight, her garden overgrown. She hadn't been seen since the meeting, and honestly, that was fine. This was no longer her story. It was ours. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I filmed a short clip for my viewers. My daughter sat beside me, her hand resting on mine. "Sometimes life breaks you down to rebuild something stronger," I said. "Karen tried to destroy a path, but she built something far greater. She built a community." If you believe kindness always wins, share the story. Let's remind people that one good act can ripple across an entire neighborhood. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Because somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone in their fight. The ramp stood tall that night under the porch light, shining like a quiet symbol of victory, proof that compassion, when united, is indestructible. And as I carried my daughter inside, she whispered, "Dad, we won." I smiled and said, "No, sweetheart, we all did." That night, after everyone went home and the laughter faded into quiet, I sat on the porch alone, staring at the new ramp glistening under the soft streetlights. The same path that once symbolized pain now stood as a monument to unity, kindness, and courage. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Hey, everyone, if you've been watching this far, I just want to say thank you." I began, my voice steady but emotional. "You've heard our story, a story about one neighbor's cruelty and a whole block's compassion. But this isn't just my story. It's a reminder that All of us have the power to stand up when something's wrong. I paused, looking straight into the camera. So, tell me, what would you have done if someone tried to take away your child's freedom like that? Have you ever faced someone like Karen in your neighborhood? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one of them. And while you're at it, let me know where you're watching from, your city, your state. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Whether you're in Texas, New York, Florida, or California, your voice matters here. I took a deep breath. If this story touched your heart, don't just move on. Hit that subscribe button. Like this video. Share it with someone who believes in doing what's right, even when it's hard. Let's build a community that doesn't stay silent, that stands for what's good, and that fights for those who can't always fight for themselves. I looked over at the ramp one last time, because when one neighbor tries to tear us apart, it only takes one act of kindness to bring us all back together. The screen slowly faded to black as soft piano music played. Be kind, be brave, be part of this story, and tell me, what kind of story should I share next? The camera cut, but the message stayed. This wasn't just the end of a video, it was the beginning of a movement. As the days passed, life finally felt peaceful again. The sun rose over our street just like before, but something had changed. The neighbors waved more, kids laughed louder. Even the air felt lighter, freer. Every time my daughter rolled down her new ramp, the whole block seemed to smile with her. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "Dad, I think the ramp is magic." I laughed softly. "Why is that?" "Because when Karen broke it, everyone came to fix it. It brought people together." Her words hit me harder than she knew. Because she was right. Sometimes it takes one cruel act to awaken a whole community's heart. I looked at her and said, "That's the real victory, sweetheart. Not revenge, but change." The camera zooms out, the golden sky behind us, her laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Karen thought she could destroy a path. I say in voiceover, but all she did was pave the way for something far greater: kindness, unity, and hope. If this story touched you, share it. Let the world see that good still wins.